All right, how's it going, everyone? I'm Sam Pasco alongside Eric Haltman, and this is KBO Chats Live. We're breaking down how you can learn about the KBO and some good picks for your fantasy lineup, or just picks straight up in the growing world of sports betting. Eric, how are we doing today? We got our brand new second half action of the series of KBO this week. How you feeling right now in terms of some KBO action?
Doing all right. Just excited for another weekend of KBO games. How about you?
I'm feeling pretty good. Just some crazy some upsets, some not expected scores, which I want to get into here with you now. But let's start with that. So I want to first start for people new to the KBO. You would think, okay, let me just Google KBO scores. Okay, that's what we're taking a look at here now. We'll talk about briefly. But then beyond that, how do you learn a little bit more about the KBO? Well, you got to check out rotowire.com. That's what we're going to walk you through here. But first up, take a look at the scores here. We're taking a look. We have, let's see, the Heroes. They won yesterday. 7-3 right here. You can circle that. Look at that. Got our pen here. Doosan, a big high scoring game. And Dinos, two shutouts, the Twins and the Dinos. And then the Tigers beat the Giants by 4. Eric, anything surprising here on yesterday's scoreboard, wrapping up game 3 of the action?
The results are more or less what you'd think. It's some pretty polarizing scores. We've been seeing that a few days, though. It seems like the gap between the top pitchers in the league and the back-end starters is pretty large. And when you throw in the fact that bullpens are generally weaker compared to the starters in the KBO than they are in MLB, if you can knock out a back-end starter early, you can really start to go off. And you've seen that with 3 different teams hit double figures while 2 different teams scored just 0. Definitely something you can expect to happen every now and then on these slates.
Yeah, speaking of top-end starters, the Dinos had one of the best in the league. Their opening day starter, Drew Rosinski, go for them last night, and you can see there, putting up that 0 on the board. And then we had the Kia Tigers, though. They did allow 3 runs, but they had their ace in Aaron Brooks. How would you compare those two aces? Are they both considered aces in the world of KBO, or would you give Rosinski a slight edge?
They're both right up there. I don't know if either of them will be quite in the KBO equivalent of the Cy Young race at the end, but they're both probably at least back end of the top 10, if not better, at least so far.
All right. So now we have a brand new slate, in case you don't know, in case you're just tuning into the KBO. There's 6 games over the 7-day week. First 3 is a 3-game series. The next 3 is another new series. So we have that. So to follow along here, you just Google RotoWire. You head to rotowire.com. First thing that comes up, head over to the KBO tab right there. Hit on that. We got some great tools which we're breaking down. So first up, we're talking projected starters. So let's see. We have some great series, some pitchers we just saw. We mentioned Brooks. We mentioned Jokic. Let's see now, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Eric, who's standing out here? I'm seeing Despaigne, former Padre, former Oriole, and game 3 for the Wiz against Lotte. I'm seeing Tyler Wilson of the Twins going up against the Heroes. What's intriguing about these upcoming 3 games?
The most interesting thing to me, at least right off the top of the bat, is that tonight's slate is quite shallow on top-end pitching. When I make my daily cheat sheet, I usually talk about 3 starting pitchers, and today was one of the hardest to even find a third. I like Mike Wright, and I like Taehoon Kim of the wrong guy. Wante Choi of the Heroes. I like both of them, and then finding a third was a real struggle this time. It's one of the shallower slates in a while, but it looks like we'll have pretty comparatively normal slates on Saturday and Sunday in terms of the number of trustworthy starters. You might be in for a bit of an adventure if you want to save any cash tonight, though, in your starting pitcher.
You mentioned a third pitcher there. I'm seeing for the Wyverns. I know they've had some crazy issues in terms of winning and then a lot of losing, but they have Ricardo Pinta going for them. See him right here against Samsung. Is he in the consideration for a DFS start tonight? Potentially 4.79 ERA going up against Samsung, a weaker team in the KBO. Is that any sort of consideration for that third starter?
Yeah, he was the third guy I listed for today. I said in the piece I don't really have any real confidence in him. But like you said, he's got an easier matchup. The Lions have a bottom half lineup, and that's even considering that they play in the most hitter-friendly home park in the league, which they won't be in this series because it's at the Wyverns. But I don't have a lot of faith in Pinto. He's walked as many guys as he struck out this year. But I think you got to give a little bit of the benefit of the doubt to former major league players. Although we are 5 starts in already, so that's going to start wearing off soon. But I'm still in a place where I'll give you a few more starts to prove that you really are up to the level of most foreign pitchers. So he gets a little bit of a boost from me there.
That's fair. That's fair. I do like that. The sample size now is increasing as we are getting into kind of the thick of the KBO grind for the regular season now. So moving on now, in case people are wondering, how can we find out a little bit more about Pinto? You just talked about his stats. But for another guy, your top-end starter, you got Mike Wright of the NC Dinos. So you go up here, you search your player. There we go. Mike Wright. Let's talk about this guy. Dinos pitcher. He dropped his first decision. That's the most recent news we have here of him on KBO. I wrote KBO tab on Mike Wright. But tell me about him. Are you really excited about him? Is he up to that Brooks Rosinski level in terms of above average to elite pitchers, or is he more on that Pinto level and pretty much weak?
He's definitely a guy that I would expect to be one of the better starters most nights. He's priced quite expensive, like most of the foreign starters are. And he hasn't been a complete shutdown arm this year. He's striking out 20.5% of opposing batters, which is good. Remember, the strikeout rate in KBO is a bit lower. It's in the 17.5% range last I checked. So 20.5% is good for the KBO, even if it would be weak in today's MLB. But it's not elite, and he's walking more than 10% of opposing batters, which isn't great. So the underlying numbers are more good than great, but in a slate like today's, which good is about all you're going to get, it's worth paying up for somebody like him.
Yeah, you mentioned those walk numbers. You see there on this start May 19th against Doosan, he walked as many batters as he struck out 5 and 5 there, and even hit a batter. So maybe some control issues, and you talked about the strikeouts. He hasn't struck out more than 5 since opening day, his first opening start. So maybe not elite, but a serviceable starter. So we'll have to look for some other value there. So moving on now, we talk about our lineups. We talk about daily lineups, taking a look at the matchups right here. So if you didn't follow along, you had lineups, daily lineups, and then boom, you're right here. You see all the expected lineups. These do update once the lineups go official. So first, let's continue with that Dinos Hanwha Eagles series now. That's who Wright is facing. Offensively, is anyone standing out to you on either of these lineups here? You see Jared Hoying, who went deep game 2 of the series. Is there anything else kind of that's DFS noteworthy here?
It's going to be pretty much all Dinos in this series. It doesn't get a whole lot more lopsided than the top team against the bottom team. Dinos have a couple pitchers I like going in the series, Mike Wright tonight, and then Chang Mo Koo in the second game, a young lefty who might well be the best pitcher in the league this season. And the Eagles are running out 3 pitchers I don't trust a ton in Shiwan Zhang, Chad Bell, and Yiwon Kim. And man, there's not been a lot from their lineup this year. So if you're playing any of them, it's purely to differentiate yourself from the crowd. They're not gonna have many value plays all series. Whereas the Dinos against 3 rather unintimidating starters, I expect to recommend them for a stack more than once this series. I've already recommended them today. They're an interesting lineup in that you can see they've got 3 lefties to start and then followed by 3 righties, which means depending on the handedness of the opposing pitcher, you can get a nice stack of 3 guys in a row who all will have the platoon advantage. So that's been a little boost that makes it slightly easier to stack them, though they've got plenty of guys who are worth starting on most nights on their own talents.
I like that. Is there one guy pitching-wise for the Eagles that you might look to quiet, or is it pretty much we're going to see some slugfest here for the Dinos?
Yeah, I don't trust any of them. I mean, Chad Bell, again, you have that rule of you give a little bit of the benefit of the doubt to foreign pitchers, but he missed the start of the season with an elbow injury, and he hasn't looked good in his 2 starts since he's been back. He's thrown a total of 7 innings, struck out 4, and walked 7. So I'm not going to be trusting him at all against one of the league's best lineups in the Dinos. Again, he does have something of a track record, so if you want to be a contrarian play, He's maybe worth considering, but he's not one that I expect to make.
All right, now moving on, we're looking at the Tigers-Bears game. The Bears, they just beat up on the KT Wiz, an absolute offensive showdown between the two most high-flying offenses in the KBO. Now we have the Kia Tigers taking on that Bears team. You know, they're both led by two great offensive forces, Preston Tucker and Jose Miguel Fernandez. Are you going back to these guys again tonight to keep up their hot start to their KBO 2020 action?
I think I'd be willing to start either guy pretty much anytime there's a righty on the mound. Young Ha Lee for the Doosan Bears is not someone I particularly trust, so I'd be happy with Tucker, as well as Choi, the cleanup hitter. The Bears stack of lefties, they're 2 through 4 hitters. Jose Fernandez, Jailo, and Jaewon Kim are pretty much worth a look almost any game. The Tigers have 3 at least decent starters, so it's not going to be the easiest series to stack the Bears. Minwoo Lee has a decent ERA, but not necessarily a track record. And Ki Young Im, who's throwing Sunday, is pretty much in the same boat. He's got some decent numbers this year, but not much of a track record. It's kind of hard to read that, but that they're not good enough that I would completely avoid stacking the Bears. The Tigers will be throwing Drew Gagnon on Saturday. That'll be an interesting call there because the Bears, as you said, have an elite lineup. I believe they're second in scoring as of right now. Last I checked, Drew Gagnon, he did get blown up by the Twins in his last start, but he's still striking out 33% of opposing batters while walking just 5.4%. I am a big fan of strikeout to walk ratio, so I'm probably going to consider Gagnon even against the Bears.
I like that. I like that. Taking a look more at these stats. And now moving on to another series now. We mentioned the Wiz and their offense. And the Giants, the Lotte Giants, they have the lowest starter ERA, and now their starter tonight has a 4.3 ERA. Do you trust the Giants pitchers at all to silence the Wiz bats that have been red hot, especially led by Mel Rojas Jr. right there in the heart of the lineup?
I don't particularly trust So tonight. His peripherals don't necessarily back up his ERA, and it's going to be the same story for Sewon Park on actually, I don't even know if he has a good ERA. I think he's just not trustworthy in general on Sunday. So I'd be pretty happy to own some Wiz in a few of these games. Mel Rojas, like you mentioned, is right up there among the best in the league. He's taken charge with Baeko Gong still out with a wrist injury. I believe he's got 8 homers now, tied for second in the league. I think he's up there with them. He's just doing everything, hitting over 400, driving in people left and right. There you go.
Yeah, take a look at his stats here. 419, 8 home runs, 27 RBIs, 23 runs scored. No stolen bases, but that's not a big thing for an outfielder like him when you got that power. And, you know, look at it right there. We got that quick update for you, climbing the KBO home run leaderboard. Is this a guy that can seriously threaten any pitching staff with his elite power on any given night?
Yes, especially because he's a switch hitter. There's basically no game in which I'm afraid to throw Rojas in the lineup. He just became incredibly expensive on DraftKings for tonight's slate. He's at $6,700, which is $300 more than I can remember anyone else being. So it might be hard to fit him in, but if that drives other people away, given that he's so expensive, I'm still perfectly interested in him. And yeah, you can see those absurd numbers. He's seems to be having multiple hits every game, 4 homers in his last 4 games. It doesn't seem like he can do anything wrong these days.
Yeah, I'm highlighting it here. Doosan, they have one of the worst pitching staffs, so maybe you give them a little slack there. Maybe these were a little skewed, but still, when you look at that, 6 hits, 2 home runs in that Doosan series, the momentum he continued over. What is this hit streak here? I can't even count it. It goes all the way back to the 26th against Kia, and even then, he had 2 hits in the 2 previous games outside of that. So he's been red hot right now. Look at the RBIs. He had 5 RBIs May 31st, and he's continuing that into June. Is he maybe a guy that you really would pay up for? Because you mentioned his price going up. Is this a guy you would build your lineup tonight, the one guy you would, especially with the pitching, maybe a little lackluster tonight?
I gave it a shot when I was sketching out a lineup earlier on DraftKings. It is quite hard to get that price in. On FanDuel, he's more of one of many expensive options. So I'm expecting to have a better shot of fitting him in there, but I'm definitely not ruling him out on DraftKings.
All right. So now moving back, so we're taking a look here at the stats here on RotoWire page, talking about Mel Rojas Jr. to go back up to our daily lineups, and continue now with the Twins and the Heroes. Their series beginning game 1 tonight, in case you're just tuning in, 5:30 Eastern a.m. Let's take a look here. Anyone intriguing here? I'm seeing a former major leaguer in Bung Ho Park for the Heroes. Is there anything that's surprising here? Ramos, we know he had a little injury, maybe a little question mark. Can you update us on Ramos? Is he fully ready to go in the key power for the Twins and their 17-9 club?
Yeah, Ramos had a collision on the base pass on Sunday that he left with, but he didn't end up missing any time. He didn't have an awesome series in the midweek, but he did grab 3 hits, which is fine for basically anybody other than Roberto Ramos, so I'm perfectly happy owning him anywhere. This is definitely the best series, I think, of the 5. It's 2 likely playoff teams, but 2 that still have maybe something to prove, especially the Heroes, who reached the Korean Series last year and lost, but who haven't been quite elite this year. We've got some interesting pitchers. Juan Choi of the Heroes, I mentioned, he's one of my 2 recommendations for tonight. It's a little bit of a risk because the Twins have a very good lineup, again, because they have Roberto Ramos, but not just him. They also got Hyun-Soo Kim right there. So it's not the easiest matchup by any means for Choi, but given the lack of alternatives, I'm interested in him. On the Heroes side, all 5 of their top 5 hitters are guys I could be interested in at various points. Jung-Hoo Lee, their number 3 hitter, is a young outfielder who's adding some power to go with his contact this year, and he's somebody I'm interested in against pretty much every righty. Dongwon Park, the number 5 hitter, is probably the 2nd best catcher in the league after Yu Ji-young of the Dinos. So he's somebody I end up with on DraftKings where you have to care about specific positions. And Hyun-Chang So, their leadoff hitter, had a minor injury, but he's back from it. And I think had a good game, this morning.
Are you looking at the handedness here? Because we have 2 righties, but yet the Twins have 3 of their first 4 batters lefty as of right now. Is that anything that coming into play here for this Twins Heroes matchup?
Yeah, definitely. With only 2 lefties in the top 5 for the Heroes, that means anytime you're stacking against a righty, you're probably going to include one of those 3 other righties in the top 5. Any of them could be interesting in a given game. I generally try to stay away from guys at the bottom of the order because they're usually down there for a reason. On the Twins side, it's kind of a similar deal. Ramos and Kim are a step above everybody else. Potentially interesting against anybody, but especially right-handers. The Heroes will have some weaker pitching in both weekend games, so I would expect to own some Twins there. Nice John Madden penmanship you got there.
Yes, thank you. I just Ramos, and Kim. When you look at that right heart of the lineup there, lefty and a righty, I'm liking it. I'm loving it. It's making me smile. Going back to Ramos's stats here, he's been cold in terms of home runs. He still had decent hits, still staying hot in the actual getting on base. But I think he could be due for a home run and maybe a couple RBIs now. This is an MVP candidate. And this guy, he had the infamous photo in front of Swole Daddy a couple weeks back. So I think maybe he's due for a home run and some big production. Is that possible tonight against the Heroes?
Definitely possible. Like I said, I like Choi more than most pitchers, but if you're not starting Choi, there's almost never a good reason to stay away from Ramos. So if Choi isn't in your lineup, Ramos should definitely be under consideration. Just a quick note on Kim. You were actually pointing to the wrong Kim. It's their number 2 hitter, Hyun-Soo Kim, the former major leaguer, is the one who's having an excellent
here
season.
we go. Sorry, my graphics here. We're getting a little messy here.
Yeah.
I'll clear that out right here. Former Philly. Right there is another guy.
Former Oriole, former Philly.
There we go. And now to our 5th game here. Lions, Wyverns. That's the Samsung Lions against the SK Wyverns. Wyverns only team without double-digit wins so far. I am a loss for words for this series right now. The Lions looked like maybe they were turning some things around, but I don't know. Tell me what are your thoughts on these 2 teams? What looks like to maybe be one of the worst series?
Yeah, so the Wyverns are sitting in second last. The Eagles are even worse. They're maybe so bad that you forgot they were in
I
the
forgot.
league.
Yes, I forgot. The SK Wyverns have been getting all the media attention for being so bad.
Right.
Before you forget about the Eagles. So yes, we're talking some pretty bad teams right here on the KBO.
Yeah, so these two teams are interesting because they started off quite bad, but they've both given some glimmers of hope lately. The Lions have won 6 of their last 8. They took 2 of 3 against the Dinos and followed it up by taking 2 of 3 against the Twins. That's the 2 top teams in the standings. So you have to give them some respect for that for sure. And the Wyverns had won 5 in a row before dropping both of their last 2 games to the Dinos, which, everybody loses to the Dinos. That's not necessarily much of an indication. So there's reason to believe that maybe if somebody's coming out of the bottom half to make a playoff run, it could be one of these 2 teams. You see an interesting gap between 5 and 6 in the standings right now. There's a 3-game gap, I believe. So it really looks like we're seeing who the early playoff favorites are. If one of these teams could pull off a sweep or something, you give them a lot more respect for sure. Not a lot of great pitching in this one. I think like I said, I did recommend the Wyverns Pinto tonight, but that's mostly due to a lack of alternatives. I think you could be happy to stack against most of the pitchers in this series, but also because the lineups aren't that great, you could be happy to use the pitchers as cheap options. That's what happens when you get 2 teams that are generally pretty poor. The pitcher to know out of the 6 that'll be going this weekend would be David Buchanan, who looks set to pitch Saturday for the Lions. He has had some awful starts and some great ones, but he's been great in his last 2. It's David Buchanan. He held the Bears and Dinos to a combined 1 run in 14 innings over his last 2 starts. But basically, you should do whatever I tell you not to do with David Buchanan because he has great days when I say he's going to be worth stacking against, and he has terrible games when I say he's good. So don't listen to me there. I haven't figured out what I'm going to say about him yet, but just ignore it. Yeah, lots of guys potentially interesting in this series, mostly because their opponents are generally weak.
All right, I like that. Well, we'll see what happens with Buchanan. I know he had that great start against the Bears, shut them out 13-0 when he had that start, and then, of course, maybe he gave him some bad luck saying some other stuff. But looking at this Wyverns team now, Pinto, are we thinking about this being a low-scoring or a high-scoring game? You mentioned Pinto being maybe the 3rd best starter today, but overall, it's not saying much because there aren't excellent starters. In terms of a total, are we going to see a lot of runs, or are we going to see maybe Pinto get good control in the game? Because his last start, 6 walks. That's concerning to me.
Yeah, I do not trust either pitcher, Pinto and Daewoo Kim of the Lions. Both of them have walked as many batters as they've struck out this year, which is definitely not a good sign at all. Whether that ends up just being, bases loaded jams all day that they work out of or not, I'm not sure, but it doesn't feel like the kind of game that would be low scoring to me, that's for sure.
All right, I like that. Now let's move on to our standings, just taking a look overall. So you're at here, top of the RotoWire page, head on over to standings. And this is pretty cool. You get a little breakdown, sortable chart here of the standings. We got runs, who's leading the scoring, Dinos, Wiz, Bears, who's allowing a lot of the scoring, basically the same teams, Wiz, Bears, Wiz, Wyverns. Going back to our ranks here, we see the Dinos, Twins, Bears at the top, and then the Eagles, Wyverns, and Giants at the bottom. Is anyone kind of changing your power rankings right now that you're looking at maybe that could come up a little bit on them after these next 3 games or could potentially drop after these next 3 games?
Right. So you see, like I mentioned earlier, that 3-game gap between the Tigers and Lions. And if you're not familiar with the KBO, they take the top 5 teams to the playoffs. So there's a real clear gap, and we're looking for anybody who might look like a top 5 team. I don't have a ton of faith in the Tigers. They've got a decent record, but they haven't done anything necessarily particularly impressive, though they do have some good pitching. But I think they're potentially catchable by the Lions, Wyverns, or Wiz would be the ones that I would think have a chance. The Wiz, once they get Baeko Gong, their young phenom outfielder, back, could start making a run. As we've noted kind of all year, they're scoring more runs than they've given up. They're just not winning because their bullpen's so bad. So that's the kind of thing where if it changes, maybe they make a run. And the Lions and Wyverns, who've been good recently, if if one of them sweeps, they're definitely going to be moving up in my power rankings
With
for
the
Monday.
Lions going up, Wyverns potentially going up. Out of the top three, who do you least trust? Dinos, Twins, Bears. Which one, if any of them, could potentially fall below that number 5 spot? I know it's unlikely because they're the 3 best teams. But if there's anyone out of those 3 teams, which ones do you have the least confidence in?
I mean, the Dinos and Twins have just done everything right so far this year, so it's hard to say either of them, which makes it the Bears by default. Bears have an awesome offense. Their pitching has just been bad, and they just lost one of their starters, Young-Chan Lee, to Tommy John surgery, which means they're good. They've already had a weak rotation. They got to find whoever their next man up is. I don't know who that is yet, but he's clearly not that good if he couldn't break into the rotation they've already had. So it's the kind of thing where if you get a team that's been good in the past, the Bears have made 5 straight Korean series. It's hard to get much better than that. You kind of figure if they fix that one flaw, they're going to be elite again this year because they've been elite for 5 straight years. But it's hard to ignore their pitching so far.
I like that. So one last team I wanted to talk about here was the Heroes. We know we had some news break from them that they were going to be waiving Taylor Motter, one of their foreign American bats, because of some issues. But how do you think their offense has been able to hold up? We saw go right back standings. Where were they in the standings? So easy to find out on rotowire.com there. Doing a little ad for it. But of course, tied for 4th. How have your thoughts been on the Heroes so far? We saw them sweep the Eagles, but maybe that's not saying that much because the Eagles, like we said, one of the worst teams. So bad you forget about them. What are your thoughts so far on Heroes losing what was supposed to be one of their best players?
Yeah, I mean, they've been just fine without him. They haven't had an elite offense, but I really like their top 5. All 5 of the guys are guys that I frequently have in my lineups. That would be Hyun Chang So, the leadoff man, who's good on-base percentage guy with some speed. Hassan Kim hits second. He's a young shortstop who's trying to come to MLB next year. He's more expensive than I'd like on DraftKings, so I don't end up using him that often, but I do like his talent. Jung-Ho Lee, the number 3 hitter, is somebody I find myself using pretty often. He's a left-handed outfielder who's got power and contact. Young-Ho Park, former major leaguer, didn't quite work out for him. He didn't have the batting average over here, and as you can see, he doesn't have the batting average in Korea this year either, but he's got plenty of power. He suffers in DFS just because there's so many good first basemen, at least on DraftKings where that matters. He's somebody I'll end up with a little bit more often on FanDuel where that matters less. And then Dongwon Park, who is, I think, having the best season out of all catchers in the league this year. I think his OPS is still above Yu Ji-young of the Dinos. I would expect Young to be better by the end of the year because he was, I believe, second in MVP voting last year. He's absolutely one of the top tier players in the league, but Dongwon Park appears to be the second best catcher. So I end up with all those guys pretty frequently. And you got to figure if they're able to do some scouting with everything going on in the world, if they're able to figure out a foreign hitter to bring in and then wait 2 weeks for his mandatory quarantine for foreigners entering South Korea. If you figure maybe in a month or so they add another bat, the likes of, a Roberto Ramos, a Jose Fernandez, whatever the top hitters for all these other teams, if they can add one of those, they're definitely a threat for the whole season.
No, for sure. I think there's a lot of possibility for this Heroes team. Just going on Park, though, his walk numbers maybe aren't the best. 6 home runs, but only 6 walks. Is that concerning from a fantasy perspective at all, that maybe he's not getting on base to score those runs or stolen base, which he has 13 of? Is that anything to maybe be a little red flag, a little worrisome about, or is a power, that 345 average, just amazing?
Yeah, it was 13 is the strikeouts, by the way, not the steals. That would be quite impressive if we had a catcher stealing 13 bases. But
oh no, there we go. Yeah,
I'm not too worried about that. I mean, you'd like a guy to walk, but the catcher's not stealing anyway, and walks are worth not too many points on either sides. The fact that he's hitting for contact and power is pretty big. I would note that he's not been a huge power hitter in the past. He's never had more than 14 homers. So we shouldn't necessarily expect, 25, 30 this season, but he could be in for a career high at age 26. That wouldn't be too big of a surprise.
Taking a look at his numbers. here. So yeah, a lot of great information on here. Injury-wise, wrapping up here. Anything notable in terms of news that might change a stack here? You see Preston Tucker doing pretty well, but injuries, is there anything specific that you'd be worried about?
Young Chen Liu's Tommy John surgery, something I mentioned earlier. Just to keep an eye out for whoever joins that Bears rotation. He'll probably be somebody we want to stack against. Baeko Gong is expected to come back soon, but I don't think he's expected back until next week. And then Roberto Ramos and Kian Cheng So both returned from their injuries. That's been the big news as far as I've seen it.
We have a fan comment here. Dabber Dan Lit. This is awesome, guys. Dabber Dan, we appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, or follow us on Twitter. We really appreciate it. It helps us out. And yeah, be sure to check out rotowire.com for all the information. If you have any questions, be sure to tag us on Twitter at Eric_Halterman and at RotoWire KBO, because we do also have a fan Twitter question. Your question might just come up on the show here as we wrap things up here. So our Twitter question today, talking about one of the best guys in the KBO. Is he the next Hyunjin Ryu? Eric, that question is to you. Is he the next Hyunjin Ryu? Big money guy, Dodgers, Blue Jays. Could Chang Mo-koo become that next guy?
So that's an interesting one. I mean, Hyunjin Ryu, as far as I know, I don't know Korean baseball history before the last couple decades, but as far as I know, he's considered the best Korean pitcher ever and probably the best Korean baseball player ever. So calling him the next one is probably a bit strong, but he is clearly in a class for himself. I mean, he's just 23. He's easily a cut above most other Korean pitchers his age, and I mean, this season he's been a cut above every pitcher of any nationality and any age in the league. As far as whether or not he's the next, the heir to the throne of as the best pitcher ever, that's probably saying a bit much. He's really only started to break out last year, which is fair. He's 23. He had a 3.20 ERA last year after a few poor seasons before then. The thing that I'd be keeping in mind is his strikeout rate. He's got an absolutely elite strikeout rate this year, almost 31%. Just quickly taking a look at Hyunjin Ryu. The season before Hyunjin Ryu came over to MLB, he struck out 28.6% of opposing batters. So that's slightly below where Koo is now. Obviously, Koo's only had a few starts this year, so I wouldn't necessarily expect him to end up in the mid 30%. But he's clearly the best young pitcher, the best young Korean pitcher right now. Certainly of all the young Korean pitchers that might eventually come over, he's the one to keep an eye on. It's going to take more than 5 starts to say he's the next Hyunjin Ryu, but let's check back in later in the year to see how close he is with some of Ryu's best numbers.
Yeah, we don't get too far ahead of ourselves, but this small sample size so far for the lefty has been quite impressive. You look at that 1 hit, 1 walk, and 6 scoreless innings. And you mentioned those strikeout numbers, 38 on the year, with a tiny, I can't even see that ERA, at a .51 ERA. Very impressive. We'll see if he can maintain that. And we do have another question here coming up from Dabber Dan Lint. Hit us up all with all your questions here, but his question is Tommy John an epidemic in Korea with the low velocity like it is in the USA? So taking a look at our injuries, which you could find out, just mentioned this here, head over to news, injuries, and you see the Tommy John issue here with Lee. Eric, what are your thoughts on Tommy John over in Korea? Because here it has kind of been an issue. See a lot of pitchers go through that, come back stronger, most of them, but overall it is kind of a worrisome issue here in America. What are your thoughts overall in Korea?
That's an interesting question. I can't say I've got any data on it right now, but I also don't think I've seen anyone else get the surgery this year, at least in the last month. I mean, it's only a 10-team league, and it's only been a month, so maybe you wouldn't necessarily expect more than one, but it certainly doesn't seem like it's taking over, which is interesting given that it seems like injuries as a whole are a bit high, presumably as a result of the disrupted spring training. But I haven't necessarily seen a ton go by, but it'd be something worth looking into. So I don't know much more than that, but I wouldn't be surprised if what he's saying there is true.
So I'm going to look out for here coming into the KBOs. We're settling in now. I know I saw this on Twitter, a couple of rumors that maybe Matt Harvey might want to join the KBO Heroes. They have an open spot, maybe more for a batter, but you never know. Just want to shout that out here real quickly as we wrap things up. As you see your RotoWire website, head over to the KBO page right there. Boom, for all the information. Check out Eric's cheat sheet, all the information he's got right here. Boom. Gotta love the little marker here. Got the new pad, so I want to show it off. Eric, any other final notes for people constructing their KBO lineups tonight or placing some bets where it's legal? Any other takeaways?
Nothing tonight. I'm excited for Saturday and Sunday because they start slightly earlier, so hopefully more people can stay up and set their lineups after the lineups are released. Some of my favorite days, for sure, in the KBO.
Yeah, waiting anxiously for those some more reasonable start times, and we have those coming up very soon on ESPN. Big shout out to all those guys doing that. Ravitch, Perez, Mendoza, all the crew there. So really appreciate it. Hit us up with that subscribe button and follow us on Twitter at RotoWireKBO. And good luck tonight.
Yeah, thanks for coming, everybody.